Cowboy accepted an Apache slave, not knowing she was the chief's daughter from the tribe he wronged. The twin sons of Charon Prime were sinking behind the jagged cliffs, spilling molten gold and crimson across the desert. The wind swept the red dust into swirling columns that danced like spirits along the ridges. Somewhere far off, the faint hum of hovering mining rigs echoed across the canyon floors, a reminder that even on the edge of the frontier, civilization had claws. Kane McAllister rode along the rocky trail, his long coat flapping behind him and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes. His horse, a genetically enhanced desert steed with mechanical hooves that clicked against the stone, kept a steady pace despite the uneven terrain. Kane's boots were dusty, and the gun belt slung across his chest carried the weight of both law and lawlessness. Out here, in a place where most settlers wouldn't dare ride, a man survived on instinct, quick reflexes, and a stubborn sense of code. He spied Red Mesa long before he reached it. A scattering of dome buildings and angular metal structures perched on the cliffside like stubborn weeds. Smoke rose from chimneys and chimed with the glowing neon signs of cantinas and supply depots. Traders hustled to and fro, their hover carts creaking under heavy loads. A few frontier kids darted between crates and robotic dogs, squealing in delight, while the townsfolk watched Kane approach, sizing him up. As he slowed near the main plaza, a commotion caught his attention. A group of traders crowded around a small hovering sled, and on it, shackled and chained, was a girl. She looked barely 16, with dark, braided hair tangled in dust and sharp, dark eyes that seemed far older than her years. Her wrists bore marks from metal cuffs, her clothes torn and frayed, but she held herself upright with an unmistakable defiance. "She's a slave," one trader said, spitting into the dust. His voice was rough and carried the confidence of someone who had never been challenged. "Got her from the last raid. Cheap price, barely worth a credit." Kane's hand twitched near his gun, but not out of threat. Something in her gaze struck him, a storm behind her eyes, a strength that no trader's words could suppress. It reminded him of the Apache warriors he had once encountered in skirmishes long ago, the fierce pride and unbroken spirit. And yet, here she was, reduced to a commodity. Kane's mind raced. He had a reputation in Red Mesa for bending the law without breaking the frontier's fragile sense of order. Most men here traded and cheated, fought and stole, and survived by doing whatever was necessary. Kane did the same, but he had his own lines he refused to cross. He wouldn't buy a slave to sell her later, but he also couldn't walk away knowing a girl like this would be trapped in chains. "What's your name, girl?" Kane asked, stepping closer. His voice was low but steady. The girl looked up, and her dark eyes narrowed, calculating. Finally she spoke. "Nayeli." Her voice was quiet but firm, carrying the kind of authority that made Kane pause. "You're coming with me," he said, not as a threat but as a statement. The traders laughed, thinking it a joke, but Kane's hand rested lightly on his holstered plasma revolver. "Don't waste your credits, cowboy," one trader sneered. "She won't survive a week under anyone's care, not even yours." Kane ignored him. With a few swift motions, he unhooked the girl from the sled and helped her onto his hovering trail ship parked nearby. The machine shuddered to life, glowing with pale blue lights along its frame, casting a ghostly illumination across the dusty plaza. The crowd murmured, some in admiration, some in suspicion, as Kane guided the girl into the small cabin. "Sit," he instructed. Nayeli obeyed, her eyes scanning him, studying every movement. Kane noticed how she flexed her fingers as if ready to strike at a moment's notice, how her posture was careful, deliberate. She was no ordinary girl. As the trail ship lifted into the air, the desert stretched below them like a red sea. The wind whipped around the cabin, carrying the scent of scorched sand, wild flora, and distant wildfires. Kane set the course toward the broken observatory ruins, a safe place he often used when he needed to disappear from wandering eyes. The ride was silent at first. Kane focused on piloting through the rocky canyons, while Nayeli stayed quiet, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "You're not scared?" Kane asked finally. "I have nothing to fear," she replied simply. Her words weren't boastful, they were factual, like a soldier stating a truth. Kane studied her for a moment, then shook his head. He had seen too many girls fall to fear out here, yet Nayeli carried herself as though the desert itself obeyed her commands. There was fire in her veins, and he knew instinctively that trouble would follow them soon enough. By the time they landed near the observatory ruins, the twin moons of Charon Prime had risen, casting pale light across the shattered towers. The observatory had once been a beacon of science and exploration, but decades of neglect left it half buried in sand, machinery corroded, and glass shattered. Kane liked it for the solitude it offered. No one dared approach, and the walls provided decent shelter from both storms and unwanted visitors. Kane set up camp while Nayeli helped with the water filters and fire. She moved like someone who had done this 1,000 times before, efficient, careful, and quiet. Kane watched her, fascinated. "You're good at this," he said. "I know how to survive," she replied. Her eyes, dark and serious, met his for a brief moment, and Kane felt a chill. He didn't know why, but he sensed she was hiding more than just fear. That night, the desert was alive with sound. Strange creatures rustled in the sands, and the hum of ancient alien machinery deep below the observatory thrummed through the ground. Kane lay by the fire, sharpening his revolver's energy cells, and stole glances at Nayeli. She was sitting quietly, her knees drawn up, watching the sky. "Ever wonder what's out there?" he asked, gesturing toward the stars. The sky stretched wide and endless, dotted with planets and nebulae, each one a promise of wealth or death. "I don't wonder," she said softly. "I survive." Kane chuckled. "Pragmatic. I like that." A sudden sound, a rustle in the sand, made Kane sit up instantly. He grabbed his revolver and scanned the area, muscles taut. Nayeli was already on her feet, moving like a shadow, silent and precise. A pack of scavenger drones, rusted and dangerous, emerged from the dunes. Their sensors glowed red, scanning for prey. Without a word, Kane fired, plasma bolts streaking through the air. Nayeli darted between them, her movements sharp and lethal, disabling drones with small electro-knives she produced from hidden folds in her clothes. Kane couldn't help but admire her skill. When the last drone fell, the desert settled into eerie silence again. Kane exhaled slowly, lowering his weapon. "You're no ordinary girl," he said. "I told you," Nayeli replied, her voice steady. "I survive." Kane looked at her for a long moment, sensing the unspoken truth in her words. There was more to her story, he was sure of it. But asking now could break something delicate. For now, they would survive. That was enough. The fire crackled, and the night deepened. The desert was harsh, but it was home to those who dared to endure. Kane and Nayeli sat in quiet watch, two unlikely companions bound by survival fate and the secrets neither dared speak aloud. Somewhere far in the desert, shadows moved, watching, waiting. Kane did not know it yet, but the choices he made tonight, rescuing the girl he called Nayeli, would stir old ghosts and ignite conflicts that had lain dormant for years. By morning, the frontier would feel smaller, yet infinitely more dangerous. And the girl he had accepted as a companion, a survivor, carried a past he could never have imagined, and a future that might demand his own redemption. The dawn came slow over Karan Prime, painting the jagged cliffs in shades of orange and purple. Kane McAllister stirred in the ruins of the observatory, rubbing dust from his eyes. The desert night had been quiet after the drone attack, but the tension in the air reminded him that quiet always came before trouble. Nayeli had risen before him, moving with her usual precision. She checked the water supplies and arranged the firewood while Kane inspected his weapons. He had noticed how carefully she observed everything, from the shifting sand patterns to the far-off ridges where predators might lurk. It was as if she could read the desert itself. "Where are you from?" Kane asked as she worked. The question had been burning in his mind since last night. Nayeli froze, but only for a moment. "I've been many places," she said finally, her voice even, hiding whatever emotions ran through her. Kane frowned. That wasn't much of an answer. But he didn't press. The desert taught patience, and he knew some questions had to wait. They rode out together later that morning, Kane guiding their trail ship through narrow canyons, Nayeli keeping watch for danger. The air shimmered with heat, and the sand under the ship's hover plates hissed faintly. Kane sensed something in the distance, movement that didn't belong to the wind or wildlife. "Stop," he whispered, shutting down the ship's engine. The silence was sudden, thick. Nayeli crouched low, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Scouts," she said. "Not human." Kane's hand instinctively went to his plasma revolver. From the ridge above, a group of armored raiders emerged, mounted on biomechanical creatures. Their armor glinted in the sunlight, and their energy rifles hummed. Kane knew these were not ordinary scavengers. They were well-trained, merciless, and dangerous. He drew Nayeli closer. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, her eyes sharp, calculating. "Always." The first shot came from the ridges above. Kane rolled behind a boulder, the plasma bolt scorching the rock beside him. Nayeli moved like a shadow, dodging and weaving between fire streams, using her small knives to disable the raiders' weapons when they got too close. Kane fired back, taking careful aim at armored plates, striking weak spots. The battle was fast and chaotic. Sand sprayed into the air, sparks flew as energy rifles hit rock, and the sound of plasma bolts echoed through the canyon. Kane noticed Nayeli's movements. They were not random. Every step, every strike, had purpose. She fought with skill beyond her years. When the last raider fell, Kane exhaled slowly, lowering his gun. Nayeli stood beside him, brushing dust from her clothes, eyes scanning the horizon. "They won't be the last," she said quietly. Her voice had a weight to it, one that Kane could not ignore. "I know," he replied. "But why are you so capable? Most kids your age would have been taken or killed." Nayeli's gaze turned distant. "I learned early. The desert doesn't forgive mistakes." Kane didn't ask more. Some truths were dangerous to uncover too soon, but he felt the tension growing between them. Nayeli's presence was a mystery, and one day he feared that mystery would erupt in ways neither of them could control. Over the next few days, the pair traveled through shifting sands and jagged canyons. Kane found himself explaining the frontier's dangers to Nayeli: trader ambushes, rogue AI drones, scavenger gangs, but he rarely talked about his own past. He had done things he could not undo, mistakes that haunted him like ghosts across the desert ridges. One night, camped near a series of alien ruins half buried in sand, Kane noticed Nayeli staring at the stars. Her face was calm, yet her eyes reflected a storm he could not name. "You think too much," he said softly, trying to break the tension. "Every star has meaning. Every shadow could hide a predator. Every choice changes survival." Kane studied her, realizing that survival for her wasn't just about the desert. It was about something deeper, something personal. Her strength, her vigilance, and her skill in combat hinted at training from a world he did not yet understand. As they settled for the night, a distant howl echoed across the dunes. Kane's hand instinctively moved to his gun. Nayeli's body tensed beside him, and he felt the faint shift of her stance, like a warrior preparing for battle. Suddenly a group of humans approached. Not raiders, but members of another frontier tribe. They emerged cautiously from the shadows, their energy rifles lowered but ready. Kane raised his hands. "We mean no harm," the tallest one said. His voice carried authority. "We've been tracking a raider band. You fought them well." "Thanks. Who are you?" The man studied them for a moment, then gestured toward Nayeli. His gaze lingered, sharp and intense. "And this girl, you know her?" Kane frowned. "I just met her a few days ago. Who is she?" The man hesitated, then spoke quietly. "You should know she's the daughter of Chief Tacoma, the tribe you, or your crew, attacked some months back." Kane froze, his stomach twisted, cold dread spreading. Memories of past raids, scorched desert villages, and the faces of people he had wronged came rushing back. The girl he had taken under his protection, Nayeli, was the chief's daughter. The truth hit him like a punch to the chest. Nayeli's dark eyes met his, unwavering. "I told you I had nothing to fear," she said softly. There was no anger, only a quiet fire. Kane swallowed hard. I didn't know," he said. His voice was almost a whisper. "I wouldn't have hurt you." "You didn't," she replied, though her expression remained unreadable. The tribe scouts watched silently, wary of both Kane and Nayeli. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Kane realized that the past he thought he had buried had followed him here, and the stakes were higher than he could have imagined. That night, as they camped under a sky filled with twin moons, Kane and Nayeli didn't speak much. Words felt inadequate. Instead, they focused on survival, watching the dunes, tending the fire, and listening to the desert's subtle sounds. Kane couldn't shake the thought of what would happen when the chief arrived, or how Nayeli's true role in the tribe would complicate their journey. Sleep came in short, uneasy bursts. Kane dreamed of fire, blood, and faces he had once seen fall in the desert sands. Nayeli's presence beside him was a reminder of what he might lose, and what he might need to protect at all costs. Morning brought a new threat. On the horizon, dust storms rose unnaturally fast, and within them moved raiders, faster than any wind should carry them. Kane and Nayeli sprang into action, securing weapons and preparing the trail ship. "You fight like the desert raised you," Kane said, watching Nayeli take position. "I fight to survive," she said, Her eyes gleamed with a mixture of determination and something Cain could not name. The battle ahead would test their limits, push them to the edge of life and death, and force Cain to confront a past he could no longer ignore. The desert had its own rules, but this time, it demanded more than skill and courage. It demanded truth, trust, and the will to face consequences long avoided. And somewhere deep in the approaching dust storm, the chief's eyes would soon fall upon them, seeing the girl who had survived against all odds, and the cowboy who had unknowingly defied fate by protecting her. Cain didn't know it yet, but the choices he had made, rescuing Nayeli, standing by her side and surviving the desert, were about to collide with a destiny far larger than himself. The frontier was unforgiving, but it had a strange way of testing the worthy, and Cain and Nayeli were about to learn just how high the stakes could rise. The twin moons of Charon Prime hung low in the sky, casting pale silver light across the jagged cliffs and shifting sands. Cain McAllister rode beside Nayeli, the desert wind whipping around them, carrying dust and the faint scent of wild desert blooms. Each step of their hover ship was precise, careful. Cain had learned long ago that the desert never forgave carelessness, but even in this quiet, the tension in the air was thick. Cain could feel it in the way Nayeli's eyes scanned every ridge, every shadow, every distant shimmer on the horizon. She moved with the ease of someone who had survived more battles than most men could count. And now he realized it wasn't just skill, it was purpose. "We can't outrun them forever," Cain said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but a knot of worry had formed in his stomach. Those raiders aren't just scavengers, they're organized. Nayeli didn't answer at first, her gaze fixed on a distant canyon, narrow and shadowed. Finally she spoke, her tone low, measured. "They're not after us. They're after you." Cain froze, the weight of her words sinking in. His past, the raids he had taken part in, the people he had wronged, had followed him here. And now, the daughter of Chief Tacoma, the very girl he had saved and brought with him, would be at the center of a storm he could not avoid. The canyon narrowed, and the wind carried the sound of movement, thunderous hooves that weren't of this world. Biomechanical creatures, sleek and deadly, emerged from the dust, ridden by warriors wearing armor that reflected the moon's light. Nayeli stiffened. Cain's hand instinctively went to his plasma revolver. "They've come for blood," she whispered. Cain didn't answer. He knew that negotiation was impossible. The desert had its own rules, and once a wrong was done, there was no simple apology. The warriors rode forward, their energy rifles glowing red as they targeted Cain and Nayeli. Cain raised his gun, and plasma bolts streaked through the canyon. Nayeli moved beside him like a shadow, disabling enemies with her knives, striking with precision and speed. But these warriors weren't ordinary raiders. They were skilled, trained, and relentless. Cain realized quickly that this was more than just a fight for survival. It was a reckoning. A shot struck near Cain's ship, causing it to tilt dangerously. He adjusted the controls, keeping them steady, while Nayeli darted between attackers, her movements fluid, almost artistic. The desert around them seemed alive with motion. Sand and dust kicked up in spirals, plasma bolts streaking like sparks in the night. Then, from the edge of the canyon, a figure appeared, walking with a calm authority that made both Cain and Nayeli pause. It was Chief Tacoma himself, armor glinting under the moons, energy blade in hand, his eyes, dark and fierce, fixed on Cain. "You," the chief said, his voice carrying over the canyon winds, "have done great harm to my people, and now you ride beside my daughter." Cain swallowed, feeling the weight of every past action crashing down. "I didn't know," he said, voice steady despite the chaos. "I wouldn't have harmed her." The chief's gaze didn't waver. Words are cheap in the desert. Actions are everything. Nayeli stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on her father's shoulder. "He saved me," she said. Her voice was firm, yet there was an underlying calm that demanded attention. "He could have left me to die. He didn't." The chief's eyes softened just slightly as he looked at Nayeli, then back at Cain. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "but actions alone do not erase the past." He scanned the desert, noting the remaining raiders, the shifting sand, the precarious cliffs. He realized that if they stayed, everyone would die. His, Nayeli's, and the chief's warriors. He needed a plan, fast. "Chief," Cain said, holding up his hands, "I can help. We can fight them together. You want revenge? I can give you justice on your terms. But if we stay here, none of us survive." Nayeli's eyes met his, and for the first time, Cain saw trust, a fragile, growing trust. She nodded slightly, giving him the unspoken permission to act. Kane moved with the precision of a man who had survived the desert's worst storms. He positioned the hover ship on higher ground, using the canyon walls for cover. Nayeli fought beside him, striking raiders and guiding the chief's warriors with quiet efficiency. The battle was intense, sand and sparks flying, energy bolts screaming through the air. Kane realized something unexpected. The chief's warriors were holding back, observing. They weren't attacking with full force, waiting to see if Kane's intentions were true. This was a test, and Kane had to prove himself. He fought with everything he had, not holding back, taking calculated risks to protect Nayeli and the chief. Nayeli moved like a shadow, her knives and small blasters disabling the raiders with deadly precision. Kane couldn't help but admire her skill. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, beyond the training of any ordinary warrior. After what felt like hours, the last raider fell. The desert grew quiet again, dust settling over the canyon floor. Kane lowered his weapons, chest heaving, sweat and sand clinging to his skin. Nayeli stood beside him, equally exhausted but alert. Chief Tacoma approached, his energy blade sheathed. He studied Kane, looking for any sign of deceit. Kane met his gaze unflinching. "You have skill," the chief said finally, "and courage. But skill alone does not earn trust. Only choices do." "I made a choice," he said simply. "I chose to save her. I chose to fight with you. I chose to survive the desert and protect her. I'll keep making the right choices every day if you let me." Nayeli's hand touched Kane's arm lightly. "He means what he says," she whispered. Her presence was a silent reminder of what was at stake: their survival, their honor, and the fragile trust being built between a cowboy and a tribe he had wronged. The chief studied them for a long moment, then finally spoke. "You are not my enemy tonight. But the desert is unforgiving. One wrong step, and that could change." Kane exhaled slowly, relief mixing with tension. He knew the chief's words were both a warning and an acknowledgement. They had survived this night, but the desert was not done testing them. Later, around the fire, Kane and Nayeli tended their weapons and supplies. Silence stretched between them, comfortable but charged with unspoken thoughts. Nayeli glanced at him, eyes dark and serious. "You lied to me," Kane said, finally breaking the quiet. "Not about your name, but about your history. You didn't tell me you were the chief's daughter." Nayeli's eyes met his, unwavering. "I didn't know if I could trust you," she said. "I needed to see if you were worth saving me." Kane nodded slowly. He understood now. Survival wasn't just about skill. It was about trust, loyalty, and decisions made under fire. Nayeli had tested him, and in doing so, had earned her own place beside him in the desert. The night grew deep, and the twin moons cast long shadows over the ruins of the observatory. Kane couldn't sleep, not fully. His mind raced with the consequences of the day, the raiders, the chief's judgment, and the realization that the girl he had saved carried a bloodline that could ignite both vengeance and honor. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Kane and Nayeli would need to navigate the desert, evade more raiders, and face the chief's tests. Their journey had changed. What had started as a rescue mission had become a path of redemption, one that demanded courage, honesty, and the willingness to face the past without flinching. And in the silent desert, Kane realized that the girl he had saved was more than just a companion. Nayeli was a force of nature, a reminder of both the fragility and strength of life on the frontier. Her presence challenged him, guided him, and gave him a chance to make things right, not just for her, but for himself, and for the countless lives touched by his past mistakes. The desert whispered around them, and Kane knew that the final reckoning was coming. The chief's eyes, the raiders' shadows, and the unforgiving wilderness would test them all. But for the first time, Kane felt that maybe, just maybe, he could survive not only the desert, but the weight of his own choices. The frontier was wide, wild, and dangerous. But Kane McAllister had learned that survival was about more than bullets and courage. It was about the bonds formed in fire, the loyalty forged in battle, and the strength to face the past even when it threatened to destroy the future. The desert air was heavy with heat and tension. Kane McAllister rode beside Nayeli through a narrow canyon, the twin moons of Caron Prime casting long shadows over jagged cliffs. The ruins of the observatory lay behind them, a silent witness to the battles and secrets that had brought them here. Every step of the hover ship was careful, precise. The desert offered no second chances. Behind them, dust swirled in the distance. Kane squinted and saw the glint of energy rifles. The raiders had returned, larger in number, and this time they weren't alone. Leading them was a figure Kane knew all too well, the second-in-command from the raid that had destroyed Naeli's village months ago. The one who had ordered the attack that left blood on Kane's hands and guilt in his chest. "They've come for blood," Kane muttered, adjusting his revolver. Naeli didn't speak, but her posture was sharp, alert. Her eyes scanned every ridge, every shadow, calculating the approach. Kane realized she had inherited her father's strength and her tribe's instincts. She was ready for whatever came next. Chief Takuma emerged from a hidden ridge above them, energy blade in hand. His eyes glowed in the pale moonlight as he surveyed the battlefield below. His warriors flanked him, ready but restrained. Kane's stomach twisted. The chief had every right to strike him down, but instead he watched, waiting. "This ends tonight," Kane said quietly. His voice was calm, but inside adrenaline surged. He had come to the desert seeking redemption, and now he had to fight for it. Not just for himself, but for Naeli and the lives his past had endangered. The raiders charged, hooves kicking up sand, energy rifles firing in streaks of red and green. Kane and Naeli moved as one. He fired plasma bolts with precision, striking the armored raiders' weak points. Naeli darted between attackers, knives, and small blasters, disabling anyone who got too close. Their movements were coordinated, almost instinctive, a dance of survival honed through battle. One raider tried to flank them from the ridge. Kane spotted him just in time, leaping from the hover ship and rolling behind a boulder. He fired a charged shot that struck the raider's armor, sending sparks into the night. Naeli moved swiftly to intercept another raider, flipping over a rock and slashing with her knife. The desert echoed with the clash of metal, plasma bolts, and shouts of fury. The chief observed from above, his energy blade humming with power, his eyes dark and unreadable, locked on Kane. But something shifted in the chief's gaze when he saw Naeli fighting beside the cowboy who had once wronged them. There was a spark of recognition, respect, and the faintest hint of approval. Kane realized the battle was not just against the raiders, it was a test of his character, his choices, and his willingness to face the consequences of his past. Every shot fired, every move made, was a statement. He was no longer a man running from mistakes. He was a man trying to make them right. The raider leader from Kane's past appeared at the head of the charge, wielding a modified energy rifle with lethal precision. Kane's eyes narrowed. This was the man responsible for the blood spilled during the previous raid, and now he had returned to finish what he had started. "You!" Kane shouted, aiming his revolver. Plasma bolts streaked through the night as the two men clashed, energy sparks flying with each shot. Kane dodged a powerful blast, rolling behind a boulder and returning fire. The leader was skilled, but Kane's determination was fiercer. Every strike carried not just survival instinct, but the weight of remorse and the will to protect those he had once harmed. Meanwhile, Naeli faced multiple raiders, moving with the grace and precision of a warrior born to fight. Her knives flashed, disabling weapons and striking vital points. She moved with a calm focus, her eyes never leaving the horizon, her mind always calculating the next move. Kane noticed how her skills mirrored her father's teachings, a blend of strategy, strength, and unwavering courage. The battle raged for hours. Sand whipped through the air, scorching heat mingling with the cool glow of plasma bolts. Kane and Naeli fought side by side, covering each other, moving in perfect coordination. Every shot, every strike was a message. They would survive, they would endure, and they would face the past together. Finally, the raider leader fell, struck by a precise shot from Kane's revolver. The remaining raiders hesitated, seeing their leader defeated. Naeli moved to intercept the last few, disabling them with calm efficiency. The desert grew quiet once more, dust settling over the battlefield like a shroud. Kane lowered his weapon, chest heaving, sweat and sand clinging to his skin. Naeli stood beside him, equally exhausted but alert. They had survived, not just the raiders, but the reckoning that had followed them across the desert. Chief Takuma descended from the ridge, his energy blade sheathed. He approached Kane slowly, studying the cowboy who had once wronged his tribe but now stood as a protector of his daughter. Kane met his gaze unflinching, knowing that words alone could not earn forgiveness. "You fought well," the chief said finally, his voice steady but carrying weight. "And you protected my daughter. That is the first step toward redemption." "I only did what was right," he said. "Not for praise, but because it needed to be done." "He saved me," she said simply. Her voice carried authority but also calm. "He could have left me to die. He didn't." The chief's eyes softened, and he looked at Kane with a mixture of caution and respect. "Actions matter more than words," he said. Tonight, your actions spoke louder than the past. Cain exhaled slowly, realizing that survival was about more than fighting. It was about choices, trust, and facing consequences. Nayeli had survived because of him, and he had survived because of her. Together they had turned a reckoning into a chance for redemption. The desert was silent once more, save for the faint hum of distant alien machinery and the rustle of sand. Cain and Nayeli tended their weapons and supplies, sitting near the fire as the twin moons cast long shadows over the ruins. "You didn't tell me your name or who you were at first," Cain said quietly, breaking the silence. "Why?" Nayeli looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "I had to see if you were worthy," she said. "I had to see if you would protect me, not because of who I am, but because it was right. You passed that test." Cain nodded slowly. "I'll keep making the right choices," he said, "no matter what comes next." The chief watched silently from a short distance, his presence a reminder of the responsibilities that came with survival and honor. Cain understood now that redemption was not a single act, but a series of choices made under fire, in the harshest conditions with consequences that could not be ignored. Morning came, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Cain and Nayeli rode out together, the ruins of the observatory behind them, the desert stretching endlessly ahead. They had survived the night, faced the consequences of the past, and emerged stronger, bound by trust, loyalty, and the shared experience of fighting for what was right. The frontier was wide, dangerous, and unpredictable. But Cain McAllister had learned that survival was not just about courage or skill. It was about making the right choices, protecting those who could not protect themselves, and facing the past with honesty and strength. Nayeli rode beside him, her presence a reminder of what had been lost, what had been saved, and what could be built anew. She was more than a companion. She was a force of nature, a link to a past Cain had wronged and a future he could help protect. Together, they rode across the desert, the twin suns rising, promising a new day. The raiders were defeated, the chief's judgment tempered by action, and the bond between cowboy and warrior had been forged in fire, sand, and survival. Cain understood now that redemption was not a destination. It was a journey. And with Nayeli by his side, he was ready to face whatever the frontier could throw at them next. The desert whispered around them, a vast, unforgiving expanse filled with danger, mystery, and the promise of a life shaped by choices, courage, and the strength to face the consequences of one's past. And for the first time, Cain McAllister rode with peace, not because the desert was calm, but because he had done right, faced his mistakes, and survived to see another day.